Welcome back to Railroads Online. I am River, and we are here up at the logging camp. Let's take a look at the map. This is where it all begins, and as you can tell probably from the title, I have a goal of making 200 more barrels of oil. And the main reason for that goal is that it sort of works out with a lot of the numbers. Quite a few places hold 100 if you haven't noticed. This one holds 32, but there's 32, of course. I think over here, this one holds 100. Even though it doesn't matter, these are infinite logs that we can get. But it all starts with the logs. In a sense, in a way of looking at the logistics of this game, the progression, everything goes from being a log to being something else. So we turn the logs into lumber and beams. And then if we look over at the cordwood here, that also helps with the smelting, but if you don't have these ingredients here coming to the sawmill and or the cordwood going to other places, then you don't have anything. I did want to point out one thing. I want to assume that most of you guys have watched the series, but I know some people haven't. I put marks on the ground here to help me line up with these, oops, I can't get up there, cranes. So if you noticed, in this particular case, I don't have marks evenly spaced, and that's because this one fills them up every other car. So like if you notice, we were putting, well, we had one oddball car. Well, so we were putting the last car and the second to last car. So then as we move forward, we want to stagger it like that. So if you do have a log train, it's definitely more efficient to do it with a car of 4 as opposed to like a multiple of 4, I should say. So I have 8 cars here. That makes it a little easier. So this would be my first mark to fill up the first car. The second, well, I should say the first and third car, second and fourth. And then you pull all the way down to here to this mark to do the 5th and 7th. And then, to get the idea, 6th and 8th. And there we are, ready to go. Now I should have done this before we were talking. I did notice. Let's grab some more firewood. All right, just put 5 in there. I know our heat is pretty low, so there we go. That is what we need. So our goal is going to be to show you guys as best I can on the map. We're just going to do at least one trip of each type of material and show you where it needs to go, hopefully in a very logical progression so that by the time you're done within the bounds that I'm not going to show you repeated trips, you'll have a really good idea of what the game is all about and what the logistics are from start all the way to finish being the refinery and actually making the barrels of oil. So we have a lot of work ahead of us to do that. By the time we're done, we'll have new locomotives. If you see here, we're using Betsy. Betsy I've relegated to my logging train. I think even though it's overpowered, this is not the steepest course. And I feel like having 8 cars on her is not completely unrealistic. So we'll see, but it seemed like a good job for her to do for the rest of her days. There we go. Our fire temperature is building up a little bit. Let me go into V mode here. I didn't check. Oh, you know what? I can already see that it's in the wrong position. I'm amazed at how well these red switches flip. Now this switch here flips between going to get cordwood and going to get lumber. And I have another switch on the opposite side there. We'll probably see that at some point. Now, what I plan on doing, too, is showing you the trip, but being quiet generally for any long periods in between. I may make some quick, mentions of how I'm driving the train if I have any issues, or whatever, like for the fact that this hill I really need to put on the brakes. But I'm going to leave it mostly to your judgment. You'll see what I'm doing if you want to watch it slowly. And I'll try to remember to put notes in just for people that might not want to watch the particularly long trips. This is not a real long trip, and you guys can always jump forward in the video. I won't get into any deep philosophical topics during the trip, other than maybe to mention exactly how I'm driving the train, but not in any great details. All right, so there we go. So we flip that switch, and that switch I like to call the flipper, because I have to flipper every single time I go through here, right? Because the next time we come in, it's going to send us back this way, and then when I go back out, it's going to have to be flipped again because it's going to be the opposite way. But if we're running the logs back and forth, That's the only thing that needs to be changed, right? So this loop becomes a loop that only, where you have to flip two, because I'm going to have another one on the other end that's the same exact way. So there we go. So we'll head down to the sawmill. I already have some stuff, so the only thing you're not going to see, like I said, I'm not going to try to worry about you seeing every single trip. It would take a lot longer for no real reason, but I want to give you an idea, if you watch the whole thing, exactly how long it takes to get from A to B, and what it more or less takes to get to 200 barrels of oil. We have to be careful here. Once we hit about this point, another thing I found is that the game, when you're 90 degrees to the locomotive, you can see the difference in the height from one edge of your screen to the other. Keep that in mind. Now this, I'd like to go down this one at about 27. Otherwise it gets too steep. This is one of the first lines we ever built, so it's not really that great. I could definitely have done a better job, but I was learning, like everyone else. Yeah, that should be pretty good. This turn up here is not a very good one, but it's not a bad one either. It's just you can't really take it overly fast. It's just one of our first turns, more suited to coming out of the sawmill than it was coming up this hill, in a sense. I just like to take it slow. It's one thing about this game I think that a lot of people are probably struggling with. Give it a little tiny bit of break. See that? Did you see that? Why did that one car jump but the rest of them didn't? I'm not sure if you noticed. You go back and do the replay. See how that's jumping around, that first car? Yeah, so it's just definitely kind of a sharp turn for trying to go too fast. Now we don't need any water, and we definitely have enough firewood, so I'm going to drive right past this. Let's take the brake off. All right, you can see our sawmill is pretty much filled up. We have our other train sitting there kind of ready to go. And you can also see that I've done this trip prior to this, where I have all the switches set up to just come right on in here. Now what I was talking about too is that flipper, on our way back out, we just came in the other way of that one signal, so we would have to flip this back the other way. Now I don't even know, I think I might unload some of this, but we're pretty much full over here. So I will just try to pull up so that this guy's not blocking this thing. I don't really plan on using this too much, but who knows? We might find a use for it in the future. See, we already have 84 logs. We could throw a couple in there. That's a lot of break. Now, one thing about this, if you haven't done it, definitely make sure your logs hit the water. All right, so we're only going to be able to unload 2, so I wasn't too worried about trying to stretch it out, but there we go. That should get us up to what, 96. So the reason that it's storing them up is because we need to get things out of over there. So if you look, one of the problems, this is what I was talking about, is we're blocking this switch. So what I figure, well, empty those, and then I can pull this forward to where this car is about at the beginning of the pond there, and that'll get this whole thing out of the way of that other thing. Like I said, I don't really plan on using it. Probably could leave it blocking it at this point, but why not? Just oops, it is uphill a little bit here. So yeah, I think that's probably reasonable on a couple levels. Yeah, you know, it doesn't matter. Like this has no effect that I'm aware of. It's just that they hit the water. It seems like because I have, when I was pushing my luck, so to speak, I think like this one I would hesitate to. This one they probably aren't going to hit the water, right? So you probably want to pull that forward. But the good news is we have over 100 of these logs. Now another thing I did. Let's go over here. So we're. What's that? We have 96 plus 1, 2, 3, 4, another 36. So we have a good number of logs. Now, one thing that happens to you with making your oil is that you end up using more beams. Beams are twice as popular. Right? See how we have 100 beams? That's because I went up in between the episodes and I sold off a bunch of lumber. As well as I only had like $900 when this whole adventure started, so I got about another $1,400 or $1,300 from selling off a trip of lumber to bring the lumber count down, because I know the issue that we're going to have is when we go to the coal mine, we only need to bring beams. And because of that, it will throw off the number of beams that you have versus the amount of lumber. Now, we're about to make a load for the next thing that you really need. I'm getting ahead of myself in some ways there. But I did want to mention that I kind of deliberately set that up so you guys would be aware. It's also to say that if you're in the beginning, if you are going to sell something off to the depot, which you probably should do, I would definitely consider just selling the lumber within the bounds of what you can get away with, right? Because you do want some lumber. Like we're going to bring up 24 lumber. So we're going to load the first 4 cars here with lumber. And then we're going to load the next 8 cars with beams. Now the beams, it only holds 3 beams on each car. Now the reason I'm not loading both is to show you something else. What I've done here, and this is a lot more complicated looking than it actually is, and oops, missed this guy. And I'll load this up. I'll probably just pause the video recording for a second, unless I can talk that long. But I do want to get this started and going. What I've done with the marks here, because I can't, like at first I started out saying, well, I'll put all the marks for one of them on one side, and then because they don't line up, right? Like you can see that I'm like halfway in between the cars, like the exact dead opposite. When this one's right in the, quote, perfect loading spot, the other ones are like halfway wrong. So what I decided, if you tried to put them on both on one side, you can't, because like then this one, right, would want to have like markers along here, and I can't because this is in the way. So what I decided to do was say, okay, everything that's close, right, all these marks that are close to this one, I put here, and these all line up with the lumber. All right, and then the ones that are far away on the other side are the ones that line up with the beams. So if we were to back up to there, we could load up the beams. Now you say, well, do we want to do that? It's like, well, yes and no, right? So these are our first 2. So we actually want to pull up. If we wanted to load up the lumber next, we would want to pull up to the next mark, which is this one. So I'll show you how that works. And we'll do that because I do want to fill up the next 2 cars with a little bit of lumber. Now we're not going to be going very far. Hopefully that little tap of the gas will get us there. All right. Oops. Let me V back out. All right, so there we are. So we're too many V's. Let's get back at it. Let's see, now we're not lined up at all for these, but we are lined up for these two cars. Now the reason I did that was because otherwise I'd have to back up and start fresh, right? This won't take long to load these up because we only get 3 on each one. It's relatively quick. The length of time takes from the whole car there. Let's just do this, and then I'll just show you how beautifully this works. And I have the same thing, just so you know, set up on this side. So these are closer. They're set up to do our beams, and then on the other side, over there, it's set up to do the lumber because that's farther away. So that's my memory trick. And then when we come up here, since these are closer, see, we'll have to pull up to this mark to get that next car. And actually, we want to skip a mark, right? Because we want to go further than that, right? Because we don't want this one lined up. We want the next one lined up. So we're going to go up to that mark up there. How's our fire? Now we can. I'm just going to, well, I'll put 4. Putting 3 in barely gets the heat up. Putting 4 in definitely starts. When I say the heat, it's if you want to heat your water up, you're going to need a little bit more than, just a little bit more than 3, I think, to do a good job of that. So now this time we're going to focus on this side of the tracks. We're going to go up to this mark. That should put us on the wrong side of the train. See, right in line with this. So now this one's not lined up, but that's okay. We'll pull it up the next half mark, right? And then from that point on, I'll just start using the ones over there because the rest of the train will all be loaded with the beams. Now, what order you load them in doesn't make too much difference, though I will say this. When we get up to... This is all going to the iron mine. When we get up to the iron mine, the problem that we're going to have is it only holds 24 lumber and 20 beams. That's actually not a problem we're going to have. We are the perfect train size to not have to worry about it. Like, because we can load, if we get up there, depending on which way the switches are flipped, we can just unload all 24 of these lumber and we won't lose any, right? Because you can't unload. If you just tried to unload and it was already full, it just throws them on the ground. So we're not going to have that problem because no matter how we unload up there, we can put the 24 that we have, the first 4 cars, and then dump off the last 8 in either direction. Now, you only can hold 20 beams, so do keep that in mind. We could have a problem if we tried to unload all 24 beams at one time. We would have to unload some of the lumber. I say that because if you do build another, if you had an even longer train, and if you're doing that, you probably are pretty experienced by this point, but keep in mind that you probably want to make your train segments, maybe have 4, 8, and then another 4 and 8 if you had a 24 long train. I can't even imagine how hard a 24 long train is to keep track of. Certainly a multiplayer kind of thing, probably. Let's just give it a little gas. We're not going far. And I do like to keep the heat up when I'm doing this kind of work on the train because it does help pulling these things forward if you have good pressure. Sometimes I try to be cheap about it, and then we will want to fill this guy up with water if it's not. I haven't checked. So let me finish loading this real quick, and then I'll be right back. Here we are, fully loaded. Wanted to point out, I don't know if I pointed it out too well, but we have the same number of beams and logs. We have 24 less logs in there once it got done processing them. So we could actually probably go throw 3 or 4 more of those log cars worth into there if we really wanted to. Not that urgent a thing, of course, because we're still backed up on the beams over here. I wanted to make another note. Remember how I was fancy schmancy with every other marker? The reason I don't do that here is because there's multiple different trains that come in to get lumber and or beams. So, for example, we need beams up at the coal mine, like I mentioned. Well, that train, I'm going to make a 13 consist. so that we can get 3 cars of 10 rails plus another 10 cars of 3 beams. So that'll be 30 and 30, right? So we'll swing down here, we'll pick up stuff at the smelter, and then we'll head up to the coal mine. So that just means that depending on how it's loaded, it's just not the same. I need markers like every place. It's not where the only place logs ever go is to this pond here. I guess, of course, you could sell almost, I think everything could be sold at the freight depot up there, but I'm just talking about the normal production and what makes sense, because there is definitely a logistics limit if you haven't figured that out in your own playing. But there we go. So the reason I came back now, we should have, let me make sure our fire is doing well. Yeah, fire's doing fine for a few minutes. Let's go back and switch everything to what it needs to be. So this one was switched to go up there. We need to flip it back to be able to come out of there. And then this one is going the right way for us. And that's just by chance. That's the one we have to flip back and forth. So that's in a way of looking at it, a 50-50 chance of working. This one is going to be the wrong way. A bunch of these, I have no idea. Now what I do know is that when we come back, we're going to want to probably go into the rail yard when we get back here to pick up, see, we have that last, oh, you can't see it from here. We'll show you. Let's go a little further up. You'll be able to see it. Won't blend in. All right, so this guy is still the flipper. All right, so this guy's now, well, I should say, he becomes the flipper because every time we go in, we're going to go in one way and come back out the other. So then this one wants to go back up towards, this is our route up towards the smelter. See that valley that's right ahead? Excuse me, of my arrow. So this guy needs to get flipped the other way. Now it seems like a lot of flipping work, but it's really not that bad if we're going to make some, multiple trips up to the iron mine. We have to do all this flipping, but again, once it's set up, it's not too bad. Now the thing I just wanted to look, when we come back, we're going to want to pull in there. So I might as well at least set these switches that I can see, like this one. We'll worry about the other ones when we pull down there. At least what we know, we'll be able to get to that water tower, and we'll see. Yeah, it does look like it's flipped the right way, but we'll worry about that in the future. So see, we have this one car here that's just sort of out of place. Well, that's my 13th car. So depending on exactly what we haul next, and that 13th car is for going to the coal mine, which isn't too far into our future. Now these two, we want, when we come back, we don't need them for now, but when we come back into here, right, we want this one to accept us coming from the north. So this one needs to be flipped that way. Right, is this one? Oh, that's right, we need to get out. I'm thinking that we're coming back, and my brain wants to go flip that switch back the wrong way. There we go. So we don't want to go in. This one takes us into where the logs get dropped off. So there we are. Back coming this way when we come back in. So this should all be set up. The biggest issue I have is whether or not we're going to have to watch out by the smelter, because the switches may be flipped to go into the smelter. And then there's a switch on the side of the hill that I think may cause us a problem as we're going up to the iron mine. I'll show you. That's the one that switches between the coal mine and the iron mine. So we're, in some ways, if we take a look at the map, the thing we're trying to fire up next, now that we have logs to the sawmill, is we're trying to fire up the smelter, just so you guys know. And the smelter needs iron ore. So the smelter takes cordwood and iron ore and smelts it into iron, and they call it raw iron, but iron and rails. Now, I think they also call them steel rails, which that's, not necessarily steel rails coming out of an iron smelter, if that makes sense. Now, steel is high carbon iron, but at the same time, it's usually, done at a different process than a smelter, but whatever. We won't get bogged down in the terminology too much, right? So we do want to stop up here and get some water too. I wanted to show you. Now, again, I'm kind of assuming that maybe some people are watching this as opposed to the rest of it. It'll have a slightly different title. I haven't decided. So let's give it a little more gas to get going. Make sure everybody's coming with us. Every time you start up a train after you log in, definitely, at least at that point, if no other, you want to make sure that you're bringing everybody with you, because they do tend to disconnect when they start up. Now, some people seem to be complaining like it happens all the time, and it just doesn't happen all the time to me. It does happen. It is a good idea to set your brakes if it is happening to you all the time. I don't know why. You know, it's odd to me that some things would happen to some people and not the others, and that certainly feels like one of those. Why would I have no issues or very few issues unless I'm like really on a hill? Maybe that's because I built my things in such a way, or maybe I just tend to have habits that. Oops, that was. You just glide forward another foot. You don't have to be this lined up, but it doesn't hurt to get that thing there. Now they changed this a little bit. It's a little annoying to me. Like we can't go up onto the locomotive anymore, so we'll do this. But on the plus side, what I've learned is now that I'm not up on the locomotive, I bring this down, right, line it up like right to left so it's over that, and then come back over here, try to see where that water, it definitely looks like it's going in this case. If it hit F, yeah, definitely going in. It's just a little bit too finicky in my opinion. They don't need to make it, I think they just need to be more clear somehow about the hitboxes, or just, you know, be a little more generous with the hitboxes, I guess. Wood, yeah, we might as well, while we're here, that's always my attitude. While you're there, you might as well fill her up. When I'm driving on the road, if I'm going across the country, or across a large chunk of it, if I stop to pee, I fill up with gas. Like, 'cause why not? Life is too short to get stuck out. I've been wishing I had 2 more gallons of gas on more than one occasion on those kind of trips, because the next thing you know, you get off into some part of the country that doesn't have as many gas stations, and you just don't feel like stopping at that point. You wish you had topped it off at the other moment. But we're topping it off. That's the point. Plus, again, I won't do too much of this on camera. We're going to show you everything it takes to make, you know, oil, but not necessarily all the grind. All right, so there we go. So how much fire? We have no fire, which is not going to make this. Yeah, see, I missed with one of those, or 2 of those, really. I could not see that flash of the wood in front of my face. See, now I saw it, and we should be good to go. All right, so this is going to be a little bit of a slow start here. That's all right. We're not going to be going too fast coming out of the yard anyway, but my turns down here are not world class. What I'm thinking of doing is redoing this section to make it a little bit, flow a little bit better, and not be quite so tight. Like go out into this area a little bit more and try to get rid of this. I won't fill this up with cordwood again, because I think that would just be a waste. I'm going to probably end up moving it before I ever use it all. But we'll see. It's not necessary, so it's going to be a little bit on the back burner. There's some other things that are a little more critical, and it's a little nostalgic to me too, right? That's our original starting spot. Now you'll notice a stutter. I'm not sure if anybody knows how to get rid of that. See where the train is just stuttering? And it annoys me a little bit at times when I notice it, but it's kind of the whole everything stuttering, but in particular it seems like there's some kind of a physics issue. All right, I'm generally going to be quiet until we get all the way up there. I might make some comments if we stop to do some switching, but other than that, don't feel bad if you jump all the way ahead to where you see them at the iron mine. All right, this is a steep hill that I found for me. If I get to about 30 some, it gets a little bit steeper right at this point. So that's steep. Now again, if you go sideways, you can kind of tell, right? That dip down. So it's a pretty good grade right here. But 33 should keep us going pretty good through the whole thing, actually. Now, if I knew the switch was flipped, I would be getting ready to gear up, but I don't know whether I have to gear up or down. This switch looks good. That doesn't mean the other one is good, but it's a really good chance that it is, right? So I'm going to give it a little, because this is a bit of a steep part. We don't want to go through this turn too fast, but we also don't want to get bogged down too much. But if this one's flipped this way, then there's a good chance that that one is, because why would I have gone this way? And you know what I'm saying? Like, kind of process elimination there. You know what I mean? Like, we're working to get up this hill. Yeah, it's flipped the right way. This part is the worst. Shouldn't have cut down. Now, I'm afraid that this switch is probably switched the other way, but let's just see if we can't pull up on this hill and actually get going. And if we can, there's just like, oh, you know what? I have the brake on the whole time. That wasn't real smart. Well, at least we made it, right? I was wondering why it doesn't normally take that much juice to get up that hill. Yeah, the part of the problem, I want to straighten this out, make this a curved bridge that kind of goes like out and around and then up this hill a little bit straighter. Does that make sense? Because it's hard for me to get a really good running start. And that's not that I need it so much right with these Betsy's that I've been using, but I have a feeling that, you know, coming in this way would make a big difference on this hill. We might even be able to gain some height so it's not quite so steep. I'm almost positive we're going to have to stop here, and I'm just hoping that we can get going again. And if we can, I almost really feel like that's just OP. Yep, it's the wrong way. Probably just stop on our own, darn near. It's so steep. Without even any brakes. Use the brakes not to go backwards. And I'm not even, yeah, see the whole train's moving backwards on its own. Without any, but I stop, by the way, like if I need to stop on this hill, I start throwing the hand brakes at that point. All right, let's just see what happens. Give it. Yeah, see, that's even the fact that it stopped it like that is just because if we don't have air brakes, that's just way OP. That's, you know, for it to stop it like that and pull it back up the hill, it's not right. This is the steepest part of the track, like 8% grade, I think it is. Which is another kind of OP moment right here. But I think what I want to do is swing this wider and then have another switch that takes us off that way. Sorry, I don't know if you could hear that, but I think I can redo this turn. That's on my list of improvement projects. Ah, come on, that was too soon. We'll make it. I'm thinking I have a shorter train. I'm still too much on that hill back there. Yeah, a lot of this is uphill with one area that's downhill that you got to be a little bit careful of if you're pushing it too hard. You know? Cut it down a little bit. This is more uphill than you would think for a long time, so it sort of saps any momentum out of your train in a sense. This is a bit of a flat spot, but we want to get going pretty fast, especially after this turn, because the next spot is almost too steep for the train, so we really want to get our momentum built up as we cross this bridge. The problem is I don't want to be going too fast. This is not, I need to smooth this all out, so. right here is where it's really needs everything she's got. Now you need to watch out here, because as we get completely around this turn, we're actually going to start going downhill a little bit. Which doesn't seem like that much, but you notice I probably cut that regulator down a little bit more than I needed to, but that's in fear of we'll get going too fast through right here. Right, it's not much of a downhill, but it's enough that it'll catch you off guard, and then we go right back into another uphill. And I just don't want to get, I have gotten to, like if I don't tune it down there, you get going way too fast. Alright, so we're going to go around the long way. Coming in, doesn't matter. Look, we only have 100 water left, so that's on the way down it'll be like the opposite. We'll only use like 100 water. They definitely, on this trip, want to fill up by water every time, Definitely in that ballpark. Let's give it a little bit of juice. We have no fire temperature anyway, so start running out of power, but I'll throw some more in. Yeah, we had some issues over here. I see I put my marks back, and you know what, that doesn't look very good there on the side of that hill, but we did smooth this around so it's a little nicer, newer, wider turn than our first one. Forget how much we have up in here. I think we should have like 50, I think, or something. Let's hit the brake. We have to go to that second stand. And this is where, depending on when you pull in, you might want to put all the lumber in here first. And if you do that, the problem you're going to have is if you had more than 24, this is what I was talking about, you would end up wasting it. So you have to unload some of your beams, which isn't a problem for me, but at the same time, it's because I only have 12, but you get the idea. All right, so how many irons do we have? Oh, we got 70. Okay, well, that's good. So this one will get us up to 94, which is definitely not going to be enough for doing 200 barrels of oil. So we should get that number up some more. I probably should do some math. Let me do some math on exactly how much iron ore we need to get up here to do the 200 barrels of oil. And I will also unload this train. Let's throw some more firewood in it. Yeah, we'll give it 4. All right, so we'll get those 4 firewood in. We'll get this unloaded, and then I'll talk to you before we start our trip back down. Well, we're going to take the trip back down together, so. There we go, running back to do the last of the beams. Bang. So, You can see we still have 3 lumber left because we used it all up, which is perfect because now we have a perfect balance. And that's why that's so important, is because you just don't have... If you guys watched the regular series, you know I had like 6 extra beams or whatever it was, and I deliberately shorted the next one some lumber so that we could get this back to 0 so that we could do this 12-car train. But there we go. We have 93, which we should have 1 more left. Yep, there it goes. 94 iron ore. So I didn't do the calculation. Sorry about that. As far as iron ore goes, the only place we need the iron ore is the smelter. And then the smelter, we need rails and iron. But I think we need more iron. I'm thinking that we need... Now keep in mind of this too. The refinery makes 2 barrels of oil per every 1 set of stuff that you give it. So we need half, in a sense, of that. Like, in other words. But we need enough to make 100. So the ironworks is going to make tools and steel pipes, and we need steel pipes at both the oil field and at the refinery. So we don't actually need, like the steel pipes, we're going to need 100 at the oil field, because, and we're going to need 100 tools at the oil field, but we don't need tools any other place. So the refinery is going to need 50, right? Because we get twice as many at the refinery. So we need 150 iron in order to get this, which means we need 150 iron ore. Now that's not so bad because we can get some extra coal, which we only need 100 of the coal. So we're kind of stacked up on the rails already because you get extra rails in that sense. Like you only use the rails at the iron or the coal mine, not the other. So yes, I did flip this switch, which is good. Especially because we're so close to it. And yeah, we definitely need some fire. I did fill it with water while we went by that station right there. Let's see if we can get all 5 in. Yeah, all 5 went in, no problem. Yeah, no reason to not to start our journey back. So we have 94, and that means we are going to, and we get 24 each time. All right, so 50 would get us up to 140 something, 142, right? Well, not 50. 2 trips would be 148. So I think I need to make 3 more trips up to here if we were going to do that. Now, the fact of the matter is I should have some stuff at the smelter, right? So that might save me taking that extra trip. Is it really that important? Like, you know, are we really fighting it that close at that point? We'll see, right? Like, in other words, I'm not trying to be that nitpicky on the absolute minimum number of trips. We could take an extra trip up here. It won't kill anybody. So that will be my project. Now, this is where if I don't have an episode every day, that'll be part of the reason. So let me generally be quiet, and we'll take this trip back downhill, and it should be a lot easier. We're running low on the steam already, but we're still making good time at this moment. Can get it going a little bit too fast in here. I like to put on just a little bit of brake just to make, because I have lost cars picking up a little bit too much steam. You can see this bit of a hill. Then we have to go back up what was the downhill. So right in here, it heads back up. I would definitely consider changing that if I redid this thing to make it a little bit nicer. I'll take this back off as we head up the hill. But then we have the really steep part where we got to be... I even like to come into this part kind of slow if I can. once we get around this turn. All right, everybody else coming along nicely so far. All right. See, we're slowing down just on our own with no thing, but I like that because this takes quite a bit of our braking. You definitely don't want it to get ahead of you. Right about there. Just almost see it. See, we're picking up speed. A lot of our train's still on that steep part, but this is just normal steep here, not like super steep. Once we get down to about here, you can see it starts leveling out. We can give it less brake. Use the hill to pick up some speed. I even usually give it a little bit of juice right in here. But we're going to go into like what I think is the sleeper, deadliest part of this for me is this S-turn series on the downhill. See how fast we got going that quickly? I was sort of daydreaming, thinking about how the switches will all be flipped for me the right way, and look, that's 80% braking just to get us there. We could probably cut it down a little bit. Usually like 60 or 70 is what I do. I'll pick up a little more speed. We're not, maybe. We're fine, right? As long as you don't go too fast, you're fine. Go too slow is not actually a sin. Yeah, then after that we got this turn's a little bit sharper than I would want at the bottom of a hill. You can see, look how we're bouncing around a bit. I don't remember derailing there, but then we'll be on this flat part. That little extra speed won't hurt before we go into the really super steep, which we can't even stop on unless we put like 2 or 3 cars worth of brakes. So if you really want to stop here, or if I had to do any more cars, I would probably put the regulator on some, and I would go back and start turning some of these brakes on as I got close to this turn. You know, I keep the regulator on so we keep moving, but then that would really be good where you'd had like 2 people. And they used to do that stuff too, so. Let's see, this is just really steep. It doesn't break my heart if I slow down too much to get into it. But. Probably don't need 100%, but 90's good. But the 100 just not going to hurt until we get down around the turn a little bit. See, like a lot of our train's still on that super steep part. Yeah, once we get to about here, we can cut it down to 70 without gaining too much speed. But we're still, you know, like even with 60, 70% braking, we're still, which is why I think it's just ridiculous it's definitely OP on the way back up there that we could start this train on this kind of a slope and go up with no problem. It's not that you couldn't do it. It's just that went up like almost like you were on a flat spot. You know? There we go. So you can see where I really want to make that turn less steep. So I think that involves a bridge that swings out that way. juice. We got another downhill. We got a 34% brake downhill. Works out pretty nice. But it's not until we get up to like right there. Really, it starts to get gradually steeper. It's not too bad right here, but then as you get it further up, I think it gets a little steeper. I forget exactly how I build it, but it feels steeper. Maybe it's just because all my cars are then on it at that point. If we get here, go about 31% is probably good because we're not stopping. If you have to stop, it's tough. And I would like to get, I'd really like to think about putting like a T in right here, switch in. Except the problem is it makes it a lot further away from the thing. I'd like to find a place that I could more safely do the switching, but sure, you can stop here even without the help of car brakes, but yeah, definitely need to fix that. That looks, and even that I could swoop it around there better. I think that's on my list. So this is just kind of all a tight turn. I wouldn't mind maybe redoing that, but I don't want to put that switch so far away from here because I have to flip it kind of all as part of the same operation. But that's all just sort of too sharp in my opinion. And then this doesn't need to be like it is. This could be a lot straighter. Not straight, but straighter. This time we're going to take our brakes off through here. Gas. We're still on that turn with a lot of our... Once we get out of there, we're good to... This is a pretty steep part too. We didn't lose any cars. It's always a plus. Like I said, the switches should all be good to go. You know, we're just going to go in the opposite way we came, or the same way we came out, and then we'll have to flip that switch. And you can see I'm going to make 3 or 4 more trips, and it's really not I'll have to flip those switches, which is a bit annoying, but not too bad. Like, now I imagine if you're on a multiplayer, this could get, like, some people say, oh, I'm single player, flipping the switches is bad, but think about if you had other people that were messing with you. Like we have no problem, right? We're just doing our thing. We're single player. Nobody's going to flip these switches. If I turn the server off, I guess I don't know how that works with the servers, but if I'm not on the server and nobody else is going to be flipping the switch on me and messing me up, I can go with complete confidence and speed when I come back later on today to take a few more loads. So yeah, I think I'm going to end up having to take probably 3 loads up there. I'll make 3 round trips. And in my opinion, this is the worst single portion of getting 200 barrels of oil, right? Because you can only take 24 sets, 24 of each of these. And the other stuff, like coal may be a longer trip, but each car holds 10. So you could get like 50 in a trip. So you have half as many trips of coal if you had 5 cars like I do. And at first I didn't have 5 cars, but we're going to have a fair amount of money after all of this. So we should be in pretty good shape as far as getting more cars goes. See, we'll take a check and look at our money right away. So we're going to load up 4 more lumber, 4 more, or I'm sorry, 8 more beam cars. Let's get a lot of brake on. Probably could have slowed down a little sooner. It was pretty good, wasn't it? Definitely get better at the braking. There we go. All right, so there's that. That's what it takes. Let's take a look at the map real quick and see what we did. So we went from the logging camp with some logs. We came up to the sawmill. Logging camp was that road out that way. And then we came down here to the sawmill, dropped off a bunch of logs, even though I did most of that before the episode, knowing that it would just be time consuming. Kind of like I'll do for the next one. I'll probably set up some of this stuff just so we save some time. But then we headed up down that valley to the east of me and went up to the smelter and all the way past the smelter and then down in between the 2 mountain ranges. You can see where it says iron ore mine towards the south. We went right up the right-hand side or the eastern side of that valley. You can almost see a line that goes from one end of the valley to another. And we followed that line all the way up to the iron ore mine. Now on the other side, when we go to the coal mine, we're on the other side of that ridge that's to the east. The one that's right above where it says the word mine. So we're in that other valley, the eastern valley. We'll call this the central valley. And the sawmill being on the western valley, I guess. There we go. So then let's just take a look at the money. Like I said, before I started out, we had about $900, a little bit over that. So we've made $2,000 just getting enough logs down to here, which I already had some, so I didn't even have to fill this thing up. And then we have another 3 or 4 trips like this where we'll make, like $500 maybe a trip, something like that. So that'll be another $1,500. So we'll be raking in the money by doing all of this. And that'll just be to get the iron ore. Then we get some money for bringing the iron ore down out of the mountain. So unfortunately, there's no way to combine those trips. So let me know what you think of this new format as far as, just going through. We'll see all the logistics of getting 200 barrels of oil. Kind of like the idea. It's certainly my goal for making money and upgrading our trains and getting all the rail cars that we need to do each step of this. So I have some work cut out for me, and I will see you guys whenever that work is done. Have a good day. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.